Hello, welcome, Cabbage here. So here, let's revisit the Chicken Little happening in Final Fantasy Brave Exvius War of the Visions that started late 2020, early 2021. I'm doing this because the Nier Reincarnation community seems to have caught wind of it and are now calling me a Chicken Little for talking about shutdowns. Makes me roll my eyes, but there actually is a connection between the two things, but not the one that they are thinking, so let's talk about it. This will also give me a chance to talk about some larger topics like mobile gaming and YouTubing in general, and this video could be the unofficial 5th episode of my shutdowns in Japanese mobile game series, which I will link to below, and I encourage everyone to watch. It will give a lot of context for what we're talking about here too. But once upon a time, in the JP version of War of the Visions for the 1st anniversary, they offered some special banners which guaranteed a number of URs, the highest rarity. JP folks pulled these and posted their results on social media, and people started to notice that a lot of the pulls looked the same, not similar, the same. The same units or vision cards in the same order, in the same positions. The JP community came together and mapped out the entire pool, which turned out to be much, much smaller than your average pool, and not accurate to the stated in-game rates, and this became a scandal, holy crap. It ended up playing out over half a year, with the Consumer Protection Agency getting involved. They took down the banners very quickly, refunded all the vision ore to folks who pulled, paid or free, and then put up the banners again with fixed pools. I pulled on all of these banners, and honestly, I was pretty happy with what I got. But then they refunded my vision ore, re-offered the banners, I pulled them again, and I got even more stuff that I was happy about. My progress on vision cards in particular really jumped. So I personally came out well, but from a legal point of view, this was bad. This was illegal. If the in-game stated rates do not accurately reflect what is in the pool, that's a crime. And as we saw from the mapping out of the pool, there were different buckets as well. So some players could have a better chance of getting stronger units than other players. This all hurt the trust players could have in pulling the banners, which is of course super duper important in gacha games. This was bad. As a result, a number of players went free to play, a number of players quit the game, and a number of prospective players were turned off of joining the game. This happening sent shockwaves throughout the mobile game industry. I heard it called the scandal of the year. I heard interviews with mobile game developers of other companies where they guessed what happened, and the most likely thing was that Gumi programmed a kind of a placeholder pool and accidentally put it into the actual game. Square did not check it and shipped it. There couldn't have been any malice. Square is too big a company, and Final Fantasy is too big a property to sully both with so obvious a ploy. Square did the right thing in response. They refunded the spent vision ore, and as I understand it by law, that came out to no blood, no foul. So by law they were okay, but there was still the loss of trust from players. Cut to the global side, where they are about 4 months behind the JP schedule. They heard about the scandal, and there were people rubbing their hands in delight, like, oh, we'll get effectively free pulls. We better make sure we pull on those guaranteed UR banners ASAP, so we can get refunds and pull them again. And I was like, really? You really think that they're going to not fix the banners for global with all that lead time? But sure enough, a guaranteed UR banner came. Global players pulled and started collecting pull screenshots, saw some similarities, and started crying out, rigged banners, we demand compensation, and some content creators even started getting in on that. There was one problem, however. Global players never mapped out the entire pool like the JP users did. Even a week after the banner was released in global, there were still people getting pulls that didn't look like anyone else's. This was because the pool was fixed. It accurately reflected the posted in-game rates, and it was too big to completely map out. The banner was legit, the pool was correct, and so it stayed up to the end of the scheduled time, and no one got refunds or free pulls. Although the writing was on the wall, the company wouldn't keep up the banner if it were against the law. There were still a lot of people that felt cheated because they got wound up by the folks screaming rigged banners. The developers even went out of their way with a special message to assuage global fears that the banner was legit, but by that point, the global players were so seeing red that they took that message as a personal insult. And that was a turning point for the global community of the game. Before then, Reddit and YouTube were pretty cool and calm, but as a direct result of the rigged banner's imagined scandal, the mood turned sour on social media, and people started heaping hate on the game and developers and anyone that tried to argue a reasoned approach, people like me. And this is where I started to call people Chicken Little. Who is Chicken Little? I think most people are familiar with the CGI animation movie, but what I'm referring to is the original folktale, which works as like a fable with a moral to teach, like with Aesop. Chicken Little is a chick, and one day an acorn falls from a tree and hits her on the head, and she attributes it to the sky falling, the end of the world. She runs through town crying out the sky is falling, and all the other animals of town hear this and they start running through town, all crying it as well. Everyone panicking over nothing, and imagined happening. The moral of the story is that this needless panic could have been prevented if Chicken Little had stopped and gathered evidence before running through town, and I hope it's clear why I thought Chicken Little was an appropriate comparison to draw. Now, in every mobile game, there is a point where the community turns on the developers. It's inevitable. But it was so frustrating because this didn't have to happen so early on something so dumb. It happened because people got excitable or because they wanted attention, but they didn't put in the work to back up their claims. Here, let's cut to Nier Reincarnation. We have the arena showdown going on, and many players are changing their usernames to communicate personally with me, the most visible member of the community. One named themselves Chicken Little, and their profile refers to my talking about shutdowns, inaccurately, I should add. You might be thinking, Cabbage, it's just one person, it's not a big deal. But it's like the rule where if you see a cockroach in your home, there's a pretty good chance that there is a nest of cockroaches somewhere where you can't see them. Perhaps there is some group using Chicken Little as a point of attack, and I thought I would give my side of the story, since I don't expect anyone else to do it. But anyway, at first glance, we can see how my recent talk about mobile game shutdowns can look like I am being a Chicken Little, but there are some key differences. For one thing, I am not saying anything definite. I often attach statistical percentages to my predictions because I am not sure. What I want to say is that there is a certain amount of possibility that this thing will happen, and a certain amount of possibility that that thing will happen, and that the higher the percentage, the more likely I think it is to happen. But I still think that other thing is possible. Now, statistics is hard to understand. There have been multiple instances where I put up a slide like this, and I get comments like, hey, those don't add up to 100%. And for some reason, when people see something of having like an 80% chance of happening, they interpret it as guaranteed to happen. But think of it this way. If you knew at the beginning of the day that if you went outside, you had a 20% chance of dying, would you go outside? 20% is still fairly likely, and we shouldn't expect it to happen, but we shouldn't be surprised either if it happens. For another thing, I don't think I'm being sensational like Chicken Little. I'm not running through town screaming my head off. Sure, it's a topic that most people would rather not consider, and I understand there is risk in bringing it up. But I'm trying to do it in a measured, balanced way with evidence as a heads up. It's a similar situation to a parent that is faced with the birds and the bees talk with their child. It's awkward, and it's maybe raising awareness of something that they were not aware of before, but it's better to have it come from a trusted, experienced adult than pretending it doesn't exist and having some sweaty, pimply 16-year-old in the back of a car teach your child. And that's where the connection lies between the rigged banner's controversy in War of the Visions and my talks of shutdowns in the context of Nier Reincarnation. I am essentially talking about shutdowns ahead of time, so that I can get out ahead of know-nothing drama queens before they can spread bad information and panic. With my long-time experience, I am educating the community so that we can know what to look for and so that we can know how to interpret different signs. One key piece of advice I can give is, don't go looking for signs. The other day I got a comment saying the tower has an end date next year. Is that the game shutdown date? don't do that, please. Please watch my series of shutdowns in Japanese mobile games, where I lay out common signs of impending shutdowns. However, Nier Reincarnation is a weird game considering the history of the mobile game industry. It does do a lot of things quote-unquote wrong, and that was why I was skeptical at launch that the game could make it to second anniversary, but I never declared 100% that it wouldn't make it. It seems some people think the term skeptical, or prediction for that matter, means 100%, but you might want to look those words up in the dictionary. You're in for a surprise. Predicting with certainty what is going to happen in a mobile game in 6 months is tough. A year or more is a fool's errand, which is why I don't do it. Here, let's look at recent developments in Nier Reincarnation and think about why it's difficult to make any sure predictions. Global is losing support for English voiceover. That's a bad sign. 2 anniversary banners of 3 units each were released in quick succession. That's unprecedented in any game that I know of, and so that's a bad sign. Almost a dozen Square Enix mobile games have closed the last couple years. That's a bad sign. But there was a new user survey for Nier Reincarnation. That's a good sign. And a new difficulty level for subjugations was added. That's not as good as a sign as the addition of an all-new boss, but it's still a good sign. And there are about 4,000 members joining in the JP Arena Showdown. That's a good sign. If we extrapolate that out, even if we're generous, we say that's 10% of the population. That means there's 40,000 players on the JP server. That's healthy. Then there is the wild card. That is the powerful Yoko Taro producer Saito duo, which throws the whole thing up into the air. So, reading the health of a game is tricky, which is why I give percentages on my predictions, but it also makes watching the game from an industry standpoint fun. And we can end the video with an updated list of predictions with statistical percentages. I'll say that making it to 2.5 anniversary has a 55% chance of happening, making it to 3rd anniversary has a 35% chance, and then shutting down before 2.5 has a 10% chance. And yes, that adds up to 100% because only one of those things can happen. But so much relies on the context of the next chapter of the story that depending on what's in there and what isn't, it could drastically influence those percentages. And maybe some people are upset that I am constantly changing my prediction percentages, but watch any professional sports game and watch the teams' chances of winning change during the game. It is based on past precedents. Looking at the data of all of the games that were in the similar situations and how they played out, I'm doing the same thing. I'm looking at the history of Japanese mobile games and trying to recognize patterns and make reasonable predictions based on those patterns. All of the time I hear people say the game is fine, it'll go 3 or 4 years, and I'm like, what is that based on? Is it your gut? Because that's not going to convince me, and it shouldn't convince anyone else either. Alright, I have so much more that I could say, more examples, more details, but this video is long enough, so we'll end it here. The important takeaway here is that I am an industry watcher, and I enjoy talking about this stuff. It's like a game beyond the game, and if you want to come along with me on this journey, that's cool. Alright, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again. Take care.